Class. Okay, so this is part 2 of our animal evolution chapter. So we just finished with the cnidarians, and we are now going to work on the flatworms. So this is on page 2 of our study guide. So the phylum name for flatworms is Platyhelminthes, but we just call it phylum flatworms. They're characteristic that I want you to know on page two of your study guide are that these are the simplest bilateral animals. Now, hopefully you watched video 1 and you understand what a bilateral animal is. These are the ones that can only be cut down one plane and get equal parts. So you might be saying to yourself, well, who cares? Why? What's the big deal with bilateral? Once you have a bilateral organism, you tend to have a head and a tail, and this is going to imply like movement. Like you've got places to go, you've got a head, you know where you're going. So that's why the big deal is bilateral animals. These guys do have a digestive tract, but the mouth and anus are the same hole. They've got a nervous system. Some examples of flatworms, so you need to know one example for the exam. Some flatworms are going to be parasitic. So probably one that you've heard about before is a tapeworm. Another example is a blood fluke. This picture shows a tapeworm, and as you can see, it's actually very flat. If you've ever had horses in your life, I believe horses have to get medicine for tapeworms like every year. So what happens is this head part has these hooks, and that gets stuck in your digestive tract, and then the tapeworm just continues to get bigger as it grows, and it makes these little segments. The reproductive structures are going to be in these segments. So then say you're a horse and you've got one of these little pieces are going to fall off in your poop, and then when it rains and the horse manure goes into the grass, then another horse comes along and is going to eat these little pieces, and then they're going to get a tapeworm. So that's why I believe, if I am correct, that horses have to be treated for tapeworms every year. I did have a professor when I went to Washington State University who claimed to have grown a tapeworm in his own body. Then you can take medication that makes the hooks on the head release, so it all comes out in your poop. He claims that he grew a tapeworm for his class and collected it and washed it out of his poop so that he had a really good specimen. I am not that dedicated to your education. Oops, I skipped. Gosh, sorry. So now we're going to move on to our next kind of worm, is a roundworm. So these are also called nematodes, but we're just going to call them roundworms. These actually, there are a ton of these guys. So they're a very diverse, widespread group of animals. They mostly occur in aquatic situations, sometimes moist terrestrial habitats. If you look, the really cool thing about them is they have a mouth and an anus in a different place. Yay! Something to look at for roundworms, they have pointy ends, because I've told you in the first movie, you're going to have a lab that we're going to do, and you're going to be looking at some unknowns. So the thing, like if you're looking at a worm unknown and you're not sure what kind of worm it is, if you see these tapered ends, you are looking at a roundworm. Okay, and also you can see these striations, kind of like stripy things, go from the head to the tail. Interesting story about roundworms. For your example, you could say, just say roundworm, or you can use this historical interesting thing called trichinella, or you can say the roundworm that's found in pork. So a lot of major religions from ancient times banned their people from eating pork. So this includes the Muslim faith and the Jewish faith. And the reason why is they knew that when people didn't cook their meat properly and ate these pigs, then the humans would get these trichinella roundworms in their muscles, and it could be very painful. So the way that they solved that was just to ban it from their religion. So some wise leaders there, but that continues to this day. The two characteristics of roundworms that are not found in flatworms or cnidarians or sponges is going to be a complete digestive tract with two openings, a mouth and an anus, and a body cavity, which in this case is a pseudocoelom. So again, you need to watch the first video in order to understand what a pseudocoelom is. Once you get that under roundworms, I need you to go to your first page of the study guide and define one of the terms on the first page is complete digestive tract. What does that mean? A complete digestive tract is one that has two openings, a mouth and an anus. Okay, and as a human, I am very happy that this evolved as a thing, because I don't want my mouth and anus in the same place. All right, I'm not pausing because you can always pause the video. Okay, moving on to our next phyla of animals is arthropods. This is going to contain organisms named for their jointed appendages. It includes crustaceans, arachnids, and the insects. If we look at your characteristics that you want to know, you can either say jointed appendages is one of them, segmented animals with specialized appendages. Another characteristic that's important is exoskeleton. So exoskeleton, so I will accept segmented exoskeleton or specialized segments, appendages. Any of those would work as your characteristic for the exam. Example, there are going to be so many examples here. This is a lobster. That's one example. We're going to go through the four main groups of arthropods. Arachnids. All right, we've got scorpions, spiders, dust mites in this category. We've got crustaceans, crabs, lobsters, shrimps, barnacles. This is the little guy from Finding Nemo, Jacques, the cleaning fish. So I keep referring to Finding Nemo because it's an awesome movie. This also includes the millipedes and the centipedes, and all of the insects. So you can think of pretty insects like butterflies, and that can be your example. Or you can think of something maybe that you'd like to eat, like crabs. But any insect, spider, crustacean, any of those would work for your example. This is probably like the third grade version of insect study, where we've got the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. Many insects undergo metamorphosis. If we have this great place in Colorado called the Butterfly Pavilion, if you've ever been there in Westminster, I think it would be a really cool date night, but that's just me because I'm a nerd. You can go in there and they have this place where you can walk in and see all the butterflies flying around. You can also see things like tarantulas and have them walk on your hands if you so choose. There's a little ocean place where you can touch many animals. If you've got a little kid in your life, I highly recommend it. Might be pricey. They might have some free days, and students don't have a lot of money. But in one area, they have like a larval wall, and you can see various butterflies in their stages of pupating. And if you're super, super lucky, you might actually see a butterfly emerge from its pupa, which is just really cool. All right, moving on. So our next phyla of animals on page 2 of our study guide is going to be the mollusks. These are going to be represented by soft-bodied animals. Most have a hard shell. So that's the characteristic I want you to know for that one. This is going to include snails, slugs, clams, is it octopi or octopuses? I don't know. And squids. So you might think, what on earth does an octopus and a snail have in common? It is a pretty big stretch there. But if we look at the body of a mollusk, we've got a muscular foot, a visceral mass, which is all this, and a mantle. This is showing kind of the mouth. Again, we've got from now on out with the rest of our phylums, we've got the mouth and the anus in a different place. But you do not call that a characteristic for a mollusk. You're looking at soft-bodied animals. Most have a shell for the characteristic there. The 3 major classes of mollusks, we've got gastropods. That's going to be anything that has a single spiraled shell. You can go to beaches in Florida that might have just gotten hit by a hurricane, but Sanibel Island, I went there with my family, really cool collection of gastropods. Bivalves, these are going to be, we've got bi in the name, so it's got 2 halves, 2 different shells. You're looking at your clams. Cephalopods, these may or may not have a shell. Still, they have beaks, and then they may have remnants of shells in their brains. Octopus are very, very intelligent animals. If you have not seen it yet, I highly recommend the Oscar-winning movie My Teacher, the Octopus, or My Octopus Teacher. I can't remember how the title goes. Excellent movie about a man who visits an octopus every day for, I don't know, 6 months or something, and they become friends. It's really cool how intelligent they are. I did want to go one story. There is a story where they had 2 octopus next to each other in a tank, and they put like a large jar with a screw cap lid with the favorite food inside, and the one octopus is just watching the other one, and neither one of them had either experienced a jar before. And the first octopus, it took him a lot of time, but he was able to figure out how to unscrew the jar and get to the crab inside the jar. And then they gave the second octopus, who had been watching the first one the whole time, they gave him a jar with a crab inside, and he immediately unscrewed the jar from watching his buddy. There have also been real-life examples of the Finding Nemo thing where they escape into a drain, hopefully back to the ocean. There have been cases where a male octopus climbs out of his tank, crosses the dry floor, climbs up into a female's tank, and then returns to his tank, and they have all of this on video. So, pretty smart creatures. Okay, moving on to annelids. These are our segmented worms. The 2 characteristics for annelids are going to be body segmentation and true coelums. Okay, again, refer to the first video if you want to know what a coelom is. So if you look, this is your earthworm. This is a pretty complicated organism. It's starting to get all kinds of things like blood vessels, excretory organs, So again, we've got the mouth and the anus in different places, but it's starting to get more complicated because we've got that coelom, which is the body cavity. There's three main classes of annelids. This is going to be the earthworms. I think everybody has experienced these. Anybody who goes fishing. Of course, Australia has very extreme things. So here's an Australian earthworm. There are polychaetes. These guys are going to be in the ocean. If this is something that's easy to remember, this polychaete is called the Christmas tree. And you can, the Christmas tree, yeah, the Christmas tree. My mouse is too sensitive. Another example of an annelid is a leech. Most of these are free-living carnivores. You have probably heard of leeches. If you watch any of those shows where they put people in the middle of an island somewhere, they are like Survivor. People are going to end up with leeches. They suck your blood. These guys are actually approved by the FDA for use in the treatment of circulatory complications. So if you have a wound, the leech actually puts out enzymes that are beneficial so that the blood doesn't clot. All right, so now we are moving into echinoderms and the chordates. So echinoderms are basically your sea stars, your sea urchin, your sea cucumber. They are named for the spiny surfaces. So if you've ever been to the ocean, I think everyone is familiar. Most people call these starfish, but they're actually sea stars. So the characteristics that I want you to know for echinoderms, there's 5 different characteristics, but you can pick your favorite 2 for the exam. So they are all marine. This means that they are only in the ocean. They're usually very slow moving or they don't move at all. So sessile means they don't move at all. They lack body segments. But the interesting things, they have an endoskeleton. And they have this complicated water vascular system. And this helps them with gas exchange for breathing and for waste disposal. So people would think, wow, this is a really simple organism, but it's actually not. It's more complicated than you would think. The larval stages are bilaterally symmetric, but the adults look like they're radial symmetrical, but they actually are not. So just looking at them from above, you'd think they're radial, but they're actually bilateral. That's an important note to make in the lab that we're going to do on animals. All right, so the characteristics of chordates. We've got 4 characteristics. These are a dorsal hollow nerve cord, a notochord, pharyngeal slits, and a postanal tail. I'm going to be really mean, and I'm going to make you know all of these, but probably 3 out of the 4. You're going to have to tell me what the characteristics of chordates are. All right, so dorsal hollow nerve cord, notochord, pharyngeal slits, and a postanal tail. And all chordates are going to have these things. All right. There's 2 groups of chordates that are invertebrates. These are the lancelets and the tunicates. They have no cranium. I just noticed I'm at 20 minutes, so I'm going to stop and continue chordates in a 3rd video.